You're listening to Release Your Resistance with Bex Beltran, episode 39. Welcome to Release Your Resistance. This is Bex. The only reason why any of us don't have what we want in life is because of our own resistance. Right now, I'm learning how to recognize and release my resistance, and this podcast tells you how you can release your resistance so that you can live the exact life that you want. Let's get started. I love making lists. I make to-do lists, wish lists, playlists, and grocery lists. When I go on a trip, I make packing lists. I love gratitude lists. I am a true-blooded list maker. So it makes complete sense that I have found a way to use list making in creating the life I want for myself and problem solving and self-coaching. The technique I have been using and loving is called a list of 10, and I use it for so many things. So today I will teach you this technique so you can open your mind. I'm going to give you 10 ways and places to use a list of 10 that can help you in so many scenarios for so many purposes. I know list making isn't for everyone. Some people find list making too structured, too confining, too organized, and non-spontaneous. But here is a reason it probably could still work for you if you are a list hater instead of a list lover like me, or if you're just list neutral and don't really care about lists one way or the other. The secret is not having the completed list. Once you have the list, you don't have to do anything with it. I frequently forget that I've made a list. The secret and the benefit of the list of 10 is in the process of the making of it. Once you make it, you've already started enjoying the benefits of it, and you never need to look at that list ever again, but you might want to. What is a list of 10? You're probably wondering. It's just what it sounds like. It's a list of 10 blanks, either on paper or digitally, and you fill in each of the blanks in one sitting without interrupting yourself. But what are the blanks, you may be wondering? Well, they are the answers to the question that's on your mind. They are the solution to what is bugging you. They are 10 of the many, many ways you could do what you don't know how to do yet. They are all the possible things that could happen so you can get exactly what you want. I really believe the answers you seek are inside of you, but you might second guess and doubt yourself. So a list of 10 implies that there are so many possible right answers. Making the list opens your brain and it makes you push yourself and stretch yourself and consider so many more options for yourself. One of the ways resistance shows up for me is by telling me little lies like, I don't know how, and there's not enough, and no one would want this, or I have tried everything already. Making a list of 10 for myself is a way that I override my own resistance to open my mind up and allow so many new possibilities that my resistance would not have let me think of naturally. If I know that I am going to come up with a list of 10 answers, possibilities, or things to try, my brain, which does like to make lists and likes to see completion, goes to work, figuring out how to fill in all of those blanks. And here is why it works. Just like in brainstorming, the 10 answers don't have to be good, and I don't have to be sure that I will use them or even that I'll try them. Just the act of creating the list is showing me that I can come up with 10 ideas or 10 solutions or 10 answers and probably many, many more if I wanted to. This activity shifts my brain from scarcity thinking to feeling abundant possibility. Saying I don't know or I can't think of anything else is just not an option when you're making your list. Once you start it, do not leave the list until it is complete, until you have filled something in for each and every blank. The first 2 or 3 items on the list will probably come very easily to you. Then momentum may set in for the next 2 or 3 items, and then a crazy outlier idea or two could pop up, and you could find a way to combine your ideas. You could think of the opposite of what you already listed, or something adjacent to something that you listed. And I always allow myself my own version of a free space, which is to write, quote, something I can't even imagine, end quote, as number 10, reminding me that there are so many other possible options, and I may not even be able to consider them right now, that could also be an answer to this question or a solution to this problem. Before I get into the 10 places or ways that you can use these lists, I will share some questions, tips, and disclaimers, and then I'll give you the specific examples of how and where you can use lists of 10. Does it always have to be 10 items? Well, I like the sound of a list of 10, but you don't have to use that number. I like it because it is double digits. It's big enough that I do have to push and stretch myself, but it's not too big that I'm overwhelmed by coming up with that many answers. If you have a favorite double-digit number that you would rather try instead, I say go for it. Maybe it is a little superstitious or OCD, but I never leave a list of 10 incomplete or unfinished. I've already decided that for myself, so I recommend that you use that rule for yourself as well. I frequently do go over the number 10, but if I'm having a hard time coming up with answers, I will sit there forever until I fill in each blank space. And then what do you do with this list once you've made it? Well, whatever you want. I often don't actively do anything with the list. It's not a to-do list or a goal list or anything. Sometimes later when I am stuck and I'm wondering, what were all those good ideas that I thought of? Then I'll flip back through my journal to remind myself of what I came up with. But more often, the only time I find the list is after I have forgotten that I created it, usually after the problem has already been solved or the situation has already been resolved. And then I'll randomly come across the list and realize, wow, I did know the answer, or, oh, I did think of a way to fix it, or, oh, I did get exactly what I wanted. So here are 10 ways or places you can use a list of 10. The first way is to manifest what you want. This type of list is the most frequent way I use a list of 10. If I'm thinking about something that I want or something that I wish would happen, I count out 1 to 10 on a piece of paper, usually in my journal or sometimes in my calendar, and I start listing out how it might happen or how I might get what I want. Sometimes I end up taking action on some of those items on the list, but usually I don't. I just set it and forget it. And then often, if I find the list again later, I realize, oh, I got what I wanted. And usually it's one of the first 3 items that I listed out. This happened once where I wondered if I could manifest $1,000. It wasn't for any specific reason or purpose. It really was just an experiment and just for fun, with no expectation that it had to happen. I listed out 10 ways that I could come by $1,000 that I didn't currently have or wasn't currently expecting. So that list included things like maybe I would win it in a lawsuit, or maybe I would earn it from a part-time job. And one of the ways that I brainstormed I could get the money was that someone would give it to me. Within a week, a person in my life transferred $1,000 into my bank account with the explanation that things had kind of been adding up and it seemed like I was kind of owed this money because of the things I had handled or paid for recently. And like I said, I had not been counting on it. I certainly didn't ask for it. And I didn't think that I was owed the money at all, but I was so excited to get it, of course. And then even more excited when I was paging through my journal and found the $1,000 list of 10 that I had made a few days earlier and completely forgotten about. The second way you can use a list of 10 is to find evidence for something that you don't yet believe. Sometimes I make the intentional decision to start believing something that I don't yet believe, something that my mind tells me isn't possible or true for me. So I will make a list of 10 ways that it is possible, or 10 examples of how it could be true for me. And you can do this too. Is there something that you wish that you could believe about yourself that you just don't really believe yet, about getting a job you want, or losing weight, or being in a specific kind of relationship, or having a certain kind of lifestyle? Why don't you make a list of 10 examples of how and why you could believe that it's possible for you? The third way you can use a list of 10 is to come up with possible ways to do something. So for me, if I find myself thinking I don't know how to do something, I will make a list of 10 ways I could do it to show myself that I probably do have a pretty good idea of how to do it or how it could get done. And that list could include really obvious things like learn how to do it, or ask someone to teach me how to do it, or pay someone else to do it for me. These all seem so obvious, but for me at least, when my brain is locked down deep in scarcity thinking that I can't do something, it is not very open to the obvious answer of, well, just learn how to do it and then you know how to do it. So making the list with all the ways something could get done, either by me or someone else, really pulls me out of that scarcity lockdown. The fourth way you can use a list of 10 is to imagine different thoughts to think. This one goes along with number 2, like when I'm trying to believe something that I don't believe. So if I am convinced of something, one thing I or you could do is think of 10 different people who either love me or who don't even know me or who dislike me, and then imagine what they would think about what I'm thinking. So what would my mom say? What would my best friends say? What would a stranger say? What would my worst enemy say? By trying all these different personas and asking these characters the same question about me, my imagination really goes to work, and it is so interesting because it's all coming from the same source, my own brain, even though the answers are so different. I also like to use a list of 10 or more as a gratitude practice. So this is probably my second most frequent way to use a list of 10, and I rarely stop at 10. When I make a gratitude list, I try not to list the obvious things that I'm usually grateful for. I try to think of unique and topical things that are going on specifically right now in my life. And my most favorite way to do this is actually on the 30th of each month. I call it Thankful 30th. And instead of just a list of 10, I make a list of 30 things that I'm grateful for right then in that moment. So I hope you will join me on the next 30th of the month and make a list of 30 things you are grateful for. You can also use a list of 10 during journaling. The example that I have for this one actually worked in reverse for me recently. I was deep into a journaling session and writing out some of my intentional thoughts that I wanted to think about a situation that I was dealing with, and I started each new thought with a little star to set it apart from the others. And so after writing a few thoughts out, I noticed, kind of looks like a list. So I counted out how many intentional thoughts I had already listed, and I saw there were 6. So then it was basically just begging to become a list of 10. So I made 4 more stars on the next couple of lines, and doing that made me stretch myself a little more than I would have. If I hadn't noticed that the thoughts were becoming list-like, it is likely that I would have just stopped when I ran out of ideas. But because of my list of 10 habit, it actually opened my mind a little wider, and I came up with a few additional intentional thoughts that I want to think that I may not have had or thought of otherwise. You can use a list of 10 on your phone just in the middle of the day. It doesn't have to be during journaling. So I love using Evernote from my phone, and then I can go revisit it on the computer, also on Evernote. And I love the formatting. I love the searchability. I love doing it digitally. You don't have to use Evernote. You could use your Notes app. You could send a text message to yourself. You could just do it in a Google Doc. However you want to do it, just do it on your phone. You can also use a list of 10 during coaching. So this applies to either being coached with a coach or your own personal self-coaching. If you need a little accountability to make a full list of 10 and not quit when it gets hard or when you feel like you've already come up with every single idea you possibly could have, tell your coach not to let you stop until you have a list of 10. And when you're doing self-coaching, using a list of 10 for a thought download is a great way to really ask yourself, okay, what else? What else am I thinking? What else am I believing about this situation? Really just to force yourself to really think of all those thoughts and get them down on paper. You can also use a list of 10 with someone else, like a friend, a family member, or a partner. If you're working on something together or coming up with possible ideas, wouldn't it be interesting to come up with a list of 10 possible places to take a trip, or 10 possible ways to celebrate your anniversary, or 10 things that we could eat tonight, just to really give yourself a nice variety and then narrow it down and decide from there. You both might surprise yourselves with what you come up with together. And finally, as I mentioned, there is probably a new way that I can't even imagine right now. See, I love using this as a free space. And right now, you might be thinking of how you can implement a list of 10 into your own life that I don't know about. So please share your way with me, and maybe I will follow your example. And right now, I hope you are as excited about list making as I am. And I am really curious if you have any resistance to this idea. Why do you think it might not work for you? Do you have any resistance to coming up with 10 items every time you have a question or a problem? And if I have converted you to the list of 10 lifestyle, I want to know why. What is the most attractive thing to you about it? And why do you think it will work for you? Send me an email at hi@bexby.org or leave a comment in the show notes at bexby.org/list-of-10. That's LISTOF10. It's the number, not the word. For all of my favorites who are on my email list, this week I sent you a list of 10, the 10 places and ways that I mentioned in this episode, and I'm sending it to you as like a checklist or a scavenger hunt so you can use each one of these examples over the next week. And by the time I publish next week's episode, I would love to hear how you did. Share those results with me. And if you're not on my list yet, make sure you join right now by going to bexby.org/favorites so you can give me your email address and I can send you this list of 10 so you can try out all these ways for yourself. Plus, you'll get every episode from me along with all the fun extra things that I send to all my favorite people. Thank you so much for listening and sharing this podcast with your friends and family, and for leaving reviews of this podcast, and for writing comments about what you thought about this podcast. I love reading and hearing when people love the podcast or have something in common with me or just enjoyed one of the ideas that I've shared. So thank you again so much. I hope you are having a great September, and I will talk with you next week. This has been Release Your Resistance. Thank you for listening. If you like this podcast, make sure you're subscribed and leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Also, think about someone who you know who would love this episode and share it with them. There should be a share button on your app if you're listening to this on your phone. If you'd like to continue this conversation one-on-one or in real time, come visit me on my site at bexb.org to see how we can work together.